Hold on.
3,
one second.
2. Try not to bump stuff.
What?
You heard me.
What'd you call me?
I called you my best friend.
Oh. This is great.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Total Discography Podcast. This is Ethan Amarine.
And I am Adam Robb.
And this is week 2 of our exploration of Weezer's discography.
Their total discography.
All of it. And this is Pinkerton. This is
dun, dun, dun.
what many Weezer fans consider to be the cream of the crop, the best
creme
of
de la
the
creme.
bunch, the best Weezer album. And honestly, I've listened to this album for years, but going through the release of this album, the lyrics of this album, the whole story of this album, I think this is the key to what this is like. You know how in a superhero movie, when the villain is created, something happens and then everything changes, the Green Goblin, the experiment goes wrong, or the Joker falls into the pit of the green goo. This album is the green goo that created the Weezer that we know. That will never be the same.
The Rivers Cuomo experience.
This, I really do believe it. This album not only changed Weezer, but just Rivers.
Yeah. What it happened is it defined the relationship between Rivers and his band, Weezer, and his fans.
And himself.
And his inner psyche.
Tell me about your introduction to Pinkerton.
So Pinkerton, I got into a lot later in life. I was living out in California.
It was about a week ago.
It was about...
I was I'm doing this podcast.
Yesterday. So I was living out in California. My car blew up in Arizona when I was visiting family. I ended up getting stranded out there with a bunch of CDs from my friend. And I really got into Pinkerton and the Alone albums. And it just kind of... I was out there. I didn't know anybody. I was with my aunt and uncle. I babysat my little cousin every single day. And I was just kind of alone. I didn't have anybody. And then I started dating this random girl. And we really bonded over Pinkerton. And just kind of felt depressed. And it defined all those moods. It was one of those things, it put me in my feelings,
If I remember correctly, I got into Weezer with Blue Album and Maladroit. And then, those are the two albums I was really listening to. And then someone told me about Pinkerton. They're because I was yeah, I'm kind of discovering Weezer. They're oh, we have Pinkerton on Blue. I was what's that? Yeah. And then, they're oh, it's just the best album. It was this is the best album of all time person.
Yeah.
And so I was so I remember listening to it and just thinking, wow. Blue and Maladroit came before and after this, and this is just crazy.
Mind-blowing.
And I loved it. And for a while, I was a strong contender that I like Blue better than Pinkerton. But I think I think this album, as we'll explore in this, it's unlike anything, not only in Weezer's discography, but most anyone's discography.
Yeah, and I feel like Pinkerton has more of if you ask any Weezer fan, they'll agree, Blue is just a solid, amazing, great album. But relationally, the way we relate to this music, Pinkerton always has kind of a personal thing with every person, every fan of Weezer.
Well, I think that the difference between Blue and Pinkerton, and then Pinkerton, and especially everything after, I think Pinkerton's the only album where it's just completely unfiltered honesty from Rivers. Mm. Whereas even on Blue, as we discussed in the last album episode, that he is exploring some deep things, but in a more tidied up, commercialized, this relates to everything way. And then he does the same thing with later albums. But with Pinkerton, it's just he's vomiting his emotions. Here we are. And we'll discuss later how he felt about that. But let's just talk about the beginnings of Pinkerton. It was recording following the massive success of the Blue album. They recorded it from September 1995 to June 1996, which is a long time.
Yeah, that's it.
At Sound City Studios in Los Angeles, as well as Electric Lady of New York. It was originally going to make a rock opera album called Songs from the Black Hole.
Songs from the Black Hole.
And we're going to talk about that later in the lore section of the podcast, but that was really interesting. I didn't actually know that. I read about it. I was I did not.
Have you listened to any of the songs from that? The demos?
I mean, I've heard some of the demos, but over the years not realizing that that's what they were.
Oh, I got you.
But anyway, so he had gone through some dark times. He had, Rivers was at Harvard. He had had like the surgery on his leg, which was like a bump. Like, and my dad, he actually had a really bad leg injury a few years ago, and I watched him go through like a pretty. You hear like, oh, leg injury.
Yeah,
but he went through a pretty dark depression over it.
It's rough because you just like the sudden immobility, and you just feel stuck, like literally and
emotionally,
figuratively.
And so this album, and he was also grappling with like this. They had just started a band and made an album and was introduced with massive success critically and commercially. And Rivers has said like he didn't even know if that's something he wanted.
Yeah.
And so he was just personally in a very dark, crazy time. I think he was tripped out on drugs, both illegal and legal, from his leg.
Yeah.
And then he was also going to school, and he would record and write this stuff between terms and stuff, going to Harvard, which a lot of people probably don't even realize that Rivers Cuomo went to Harvard.
For like, how long? He went for a long time.
And so it's just kind of crazy. But anyway, we're going to just go through the songs on the album. We're going to go back to the shack, track by track.
Oh, good job.
Man, we're getting there.
Oh, man.
Fist bump.
Boom. Getting better.
Tired of Sex. So apparently this song was written before the release of Blue. Like, this song was written before Blue. And it seems to be about he's just tired of meaningless sex with groupies. And it's really setting up the whole concept of the album to be like that's what he's talking about is the meaningless relationships and the longing for a deeper relationship and just battling with his demons and but yeah, that intro to Tired of Sex though, like the and then like
just so abrasive
and that bass like it's so like it's like it's goofy but like fun.
Yeah. We were talking about how you said that if you were to reorder Pinkerton, you'd put Get You first.
I've said that in the past, but
you rescinded?
I'm rescinding that.
Okay, interesting.
I think that Tired of Sex is perfect.
It's just great to start off.
In every way.
Starts it off.
Well, what about Get You, Adam Robb?
Get You, Adam Robb. What? Sorry, I got a little bit of that squirt. Diet Squirt.
Diet Squirt. It's the best diet soda. We are not sponsored by Diet Squirt, but what if a podcast about Weezer got sponsored by Diet Squirt? Like you never like I listen to a lot of podcasts. I've never heard a Diet Squirt ad, but we can make it happen.
Like,
I'm gonna contact them.
Be almost like when Weezer decided to cover Toto by Africa.
Yeah, like I will email Squirt. Be like, hey, I'm doing a podcast. We haven't even released it yet. No one listens to it. We have 0 listeners. Yeah. Would you like to sponsor us? This episode is brought to you by Diet Squirt.
Diet Squirt.
Get You.
The thirst quencher. So yeah, Get You. Starts out, oh man, like all of these songs just start out in the most amazing, like that feedback and just the.
Well, it's very like, it's almost like it. Some critics at the time called it sloppy, but I think that it represents, the album. Yeah. Like not only the lyrics but the music on this is very. It's not tidy. It's grungy. It doesn't take itself seriously.
It's gritty, grungy.
Yeah. I'm not wearing hockey pads. So Get You seems to be a breakup song, but it's like I think it's following up this whole like he's tired of sex. He's having all this sex with groupies and this rock star lifestyle.
Basically saying he's a freak.
And then he's in this weird relationship. Well, yeah, and he uses language in that song like I'm a freak. Like you don't even want to be with me. I don't even want to be with you.
I'm
like
spread
too thin. Like too. Yeah. So like it's just like this gritty breakup song, but also dealing like this whole album. Every single song is dealing with his
reaction to being thrust into the limelight,
but also just this lifestyle
dealing.
Of just, it's crazy. Like and so balancing his own personal demons with his lifestyle of a rock star, with the desire to have a good relationship, but also the lust and like the accessibility to this lifestyle that most people don't have. But then, and I think no other one continues the story perfectly because in some ways it's like endearing to this person, but in other ways it's insulting.
It is. He talks about some crazy stuff.
He's like drugs. It's like my girl is like
my girl.
He even says I don't. The verses are going through all these weird things about this girl, and then he's like, and I don't want to be alone.
Yeah.
So he's basically saying like, no, there is no other one because I don't want to be alone, and this girl's a freak, and I'm a freak, as we've already explored in the first two songs. I'm a freak.
I think, like, for me, no other one, like, thinking back on that relationship that I was in Arizona while I was delving into this album, that girl that I was with, no offense to her, but she was not right for me at all.
Yeah, but like she was with you.
But I was like, this girl, I have to, you know, oh, sorry, I'm too close. I was like, this girl is the one, like, connection other than, like, my aunt and uncle and my cousin that, like...
And the truth is, like, I think in times like that in our lives, I don't think that relationship with that girl, whatever it was meaningless. I think it was important for that time in your life. True. Kind of like he's saying in this song. Like, sometimes they're unhealthy, and some, you know, like, but you can't go back. So back to the shack.
Can't go back to the shack. And I would, you know, I would even say, why bother?
Oh.
And that takes us to the next track.
Dude, I just wanted to point out
awesome.
this line in the song, the first verse. He's like, "Not something real, so I'd rather keep whacking." Not something real, so I'd rather keep whacking. You. No, but seriously though, like, so. Like, that's, like, unbelievably honest. Because that's so real. Like, so...
he realizes it does have, like, a natural progression.
Oh, the story of this album, it's... Like, that's why... So later we'll talk about how confessional this album was for him and how he's said that he was embarrassed. And the truth is, he's being so... it's, like, so unbelievably honest in this album. So, like, that's a funny line. Yeah. But, you know... Every song so far has been about how he's in these meaningless relationships. Even the meaningful ones are being destroyed because of it, and then the ones that should be meaningful aren't, and he's only in it because he doesn't want to be alone, and he's conflicted. And then he's with this song, he's exploring like, oh, why even bother with a real relationship? Because you know,
it's gonna hurt me. It's gonna bring me down.
Like, and she'll see how messed up I am, and then eventually leave me. So I'd rather just masturbate.
He's like
just wanted to get in a good masturbate.
Yeah, every podcast
just talk about masturbation.
And the thing about Pinkerton as a whole, I think in one interview I was listening to that he was like, you know, it's kind of like you're at a party and you just get drunk and then you make this giant speech in the middle of this party. And then everybody goes quiet, and you're just like, "What did I do?"
And the next day, you wake up, you're like, oh. But in his case, it's a cult classic album that will define his career and life for the rest of forever.
But the crazy thing is, like, for the next like year or couple years, and even on, they were forced to play. Like, can you imagine like getting really drunk at a party, making a speech, and then you have to go travel around and make that same speech
over and over again? It's crazy, man.
That'd be nuts.
Even when you even have to make the speech, like when you travel across the sea,
across the sea,
like wherever you're at.
Dude, I love this. This song is phenomenal.
First of all, just in terms of like the music, every song on this album has just got hooks. Like we said, it's got that kind of. I think a lot of times when a band tries too hard, which Weezer definitely does, and after this album, to make like a really good pop song, it falls short. But if they don't really care, that's when you get the best stuff. And so lyrically, that's what's happening on this album. But I think musically too, he's just like, whatever, just turn up, like kill, like just. He's like, whatever, just turn up the gain, get the static. I'm just gonna like make this pop song. But what happens is you get really earnest lyrics, but also just really hooky songs.
Oh yeah,
is hooky songs
hooky?
Hooky.
Looky, I got
Looky, I got hook. Oh!
Hey!
You beat me too, but I was about to say that.
I love Hook.
Across the Sea has maybe the most addictive hook.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like it's a earnest, meaningful song, but it just gets stuck in your head. Why are you so far away from me? First of all, you can just relate with that, especially me as like a kid.
Yeah.
Like, oh, why are you so far away from me? I love you. You're my best friend. I want to. So anyway, this song seems to be the escapist song of the album, which they have a lot of
Yeah.
escapist songs.
And it's also one of the songs where he falls in love with this girl that has no he just has no relationship with her other than this letter.
So if you look in the context of the album, the first four, as well, I think we should just go back and recap
Back to the shack.
every time. Like, the song is exploring his meaningless relationships, his brokenness, his desire for a real relationship, the fact that his real relationships aren't good. And then you get to this, and he's in this tripped out place, he's depressed, and he gets this letter from a fan in Japan. This basically, I don't know what the letter says, but it's just like, hey, I love you. And he, in an escapist way of trying to escape this lifestyle that he's exploring this album, is just like, I think I'm in love with this girl. And then this song, and he even acknowledges it's such a creepy, weird song to listen to because he like,
I love that he makes it
hand,
a point that she is an 18-year-old girl.
Yeah, he
Don't
says
worry,
18,
guys.
but he doesn't know that.
He's like, I hope
But he
so.
says, he's like, on the one hand, he goes, I could never touch you. I think it would be wrong. But then he also fantasizes about her touching herself in her room.
Yeah.
So, like, and that's another, so this is, I think, this is probably one of the songs that he's the most embarrassed of.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's being so honest. Because most people, I like
a toucher.
That was a weird,
Speaking of
the song. I'm just touching Adam's hand, by the way. I'm not,
they can see.
they can't see, actually. Like, my hand is just...
It just looks. All right, guys. Well.
No, but he is being so honest because he's like, you know what? I feel really conflicted right now because I think I've developed this fantasy about this girl in Japan, which he does seem to have a weird thing about Asian women.
I mean that whole album, like Pinkerton, the cover is based off of a Japanese painting.
Yeah, it's not based. I mean, it is a
directly
Japanese painting.
taken from.
And so this song, he is exploring his sexual addiction in the form of a fantasy about a young girl that lives in Japan that wrote him a letter as a fan, and he's just, I think, did I put a quote?
Oh yeah, do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead and read the quote.
Alright, he says, when I got the letter, I fell in love with her. It was such a great letter. I was very lonely at the time, but at the same time I was very depressed that I would never meet her. Even if I did see her, she was probably some 14-year-old girl who didn't speak English.
So he makes a point in the song to say you're 18, but then he's like, she's probably 14.
He's like, listen, if we're honest,
Fudging the numbers.
we're just gonna say it's 18.
He could get on the list pretty soon, just with this album.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like I said, it's like uncomfortable to listen to, but it's also like comforting in the sense that this guy is being so honest, and we've all had weird.
Oh yeah, and like
thoughts
weird
and fantasies.
Weird fantasies, like, I mean, there are people that live out in the world that like buy like sex dolls or that like have VR goggles that have like virtual sex with people. Like, there's people that do weird stuff out there.
And there's some people that fall
And it's
in love
okay.
with
Everybody, I mean, it's
young women from Japan.
different strokes for different folks.
Different strokes. The good life, man. This song is like. Yeah, you have a funny story about this song, don't you?
So.
Eventually, after he stops laughing at himself,
Yeah.
we'll get to the story.
We'll get to the story. Alright, so when I was living out in Arizona, surprise, Arizona, feeling very alone. That's the name of the city.
I don't think that most listeners would have got that.
Yeah,
They just think you're weird.
Like, just surprise!
Like, yeah, I bet you didn't know I was about to say I lived in Arizona, did ya? Gotcha, surprise!
Anyway, you never have those lyrics that you like listen to and you think that they're one way your entire life, and then one day you look up the lyrics and you're like,
oh,
I was totally wrong.
Totally wrong.
Totally wrong. Like
Jesse, our friend Jesse, we were talking about Jimmy World one day, and I told him my favorite Jimmy World song is 23, and he starts singing. He's like, he's like the lyric, the chorus. You'll say hello forever if you wait for the right time. And I was like, are you? What did you just say? He's like, you'll say hello forever. It's like my favorite Jimmy World lyric. Not only did he have the lyric wrong, it was his favorite. And I was like, dude, it's you'll sit alone forever. And he legitimately looked like broken.
Distraught. Like
he just,
my whole life is a lie.
and like I think as time's gone by, he's just gone to accept. He's like, I'm just gonna.
That's the way it is for me.
Stick with my lyrics and still love it.
Yeah, and like the song "Apologize," I always thought it was too late to call the job.
I always thought it was too late to what I think.
Kill someone.
Too late to get a job.
Or get a job. That's what it
It's
was.
too late. Anyway,
And
continue with your
that's
story.
"Apologize" is the title of that song.
I know.
Anyway, so the good life, the lyric that I always got wrong was what I thought he was saying in the chorus is, I don't want to be a nomad anymore.
Which would fit.
It makes sense.
Makes perfect
Been
sense.
a year or two since, but it's really I don't want to be an old man because he's talking about his leg. And
Yeah, he
how
literally
he's
has a leg
limping
injury.
around. And
I didn't know that
hopping
for
around.
a long time.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I just thought it was a song about feeling like.
Yeah.
In fact, it made me relate with it less because I've related with this song in the sense that I don't really party or do any of that stuff. I've always been like an old man.
Yeah. Well, there was
But
that
he's
time.
like, well, I just
Can't
I literally can't go to parties and dance.
Well, there was that time that after the Appalachian Trail that you twisted your leg and
I did.
You're hobbling for like
I was
6
hobbling.
months.
It's still like I get pains from it.
Yeah.
Did
You can't relate.
Huh?
You can relate a little bit now.
I can. I used to got some partying on the trail, dude. The party trail.
Well, party trail.
But anyway, so you thought it was Nomad,
Nomad.
but it's Old Man, and this song he's literally like writing on a literal sense about how he broke his leg and he's had the surgery and he's in this depression and he literally can't go out.
Yeah.
Because he can't
He's just
dance.
hobbling
He's like, I
around
want to
on a
dance. I want to get out on that dance floor. I want to dance.
Shaking booty all night.
Shaking booty. But I also think that it also his leg is making him sit in the depression of the reality of that of this life that he's been lamenting for the first half of this album.
And there was the legend goes that he and I think it's true. He said it.
Well, if someone said something, it must be true.
But yeah, but he kind of like was holed up in his house and he painted his walls black and he put fiberglass and some window panes in front of his windows and just sat in the dark and wrote songs.
Yeah,
it's kind of like there's a part of that where you're like, wow, like I've never been that depressed. But there's also a part of it
cooler than it is.
Yeah, like you're like, man, that sounds awesome. It's kind of like Bunny Bear.
Yeah, it's like
when
it
Bunny Bear
sounds
broke.
When his heart was broken.
Yeah, he went up to a cabin
in Wisconsin and snow.
Wow, dude.
But like in that moment, it sounds so romanticized, like Rivers or Justin Vernon in that case. But whenever you're in that dark moment, because I've been in dark moments like that where I've made creative genius things that the whole world now loves.
Yeah.
It's but when you're in that moment, when you're going through the breakup or you're in the depression, it's awful. It's the worst thing ever, and no one wants to go through that. And maybe later on you can see the value of it and like how it's not bad now, but during that time
Builds character.
Yeah. So
Ay, caramba.
can we save that as a soundbite?
Ay, caramba. That's gonna be the beginning of every podcast. Just, ay, caramba.
Sponsored by Diet Squirt. El Scorcho. I think, was this the first single?
I think it. Yeah, I think so. We'll say it is. We need a fact checker.
We'll get.
We need someone that's
we'll do
on
armchair
Google,
expert style.
making sure we do this
We'll
right.
fact check it later.
Yeah.
We're not going to fact check it.
Yeah.
This is a seemingly nonsensical song. Like, I asked you to go to the Green Day concert. You said you never heard of them.
How cool is that?
Cool is that? So I went to your room and read your diary. Like, what does that mean?
I love it.
But
it's just like a thought.
It's a streamless, like it's thoughts, but it's also it stays in the theme of the album, which is he has this battle of wanting to have a meaningful relationship, but in this case, previous songs he's like battling his party lifestyle, his meaningless sex, and all this stuff. But
this one's more hopeful.
Well, so but I think it's dealing with his shyness. Why can't I get my head out of the sand and just go for it?
Yeah.
But he's like, so in the one hand, he's like this rock star, blah, blah, all this. Like, he can have sex and have relationships with whoever he wants, but he's too shy to deal with, like I said, the first line of the album, half Japanese girls.
Especially in every single interview he does, he's just so like, he's
awkward.
That's exactly what
he's like,
I don't know why people aren't like himself.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because anyone that looks at Rivers, he doesn't look like rock star.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the initial appeal because it was like coming out of the grunge era where everybody like had like these like it was a style, it was a lifestyle, like ripped jeans, but he came in rocking some khaki pants and some like bowling t-shirts
right at the beginning of the 90s.
Super like some like really weird like sweaters, 90s.
Oh, another thing that's interesting about Weezer and when this album came out was 1996, right?
Yeah.
And so we're in the middle of this coming of age era where music is it's shifting away from rock music, and where like the boy bands and NSYNC and Backstreet Boys are starting to come up, and then in the next decade, like that really blossomed, and the rock, like in the 90s, it was like
rock became more niche.
Yeah, and that became less mainstream, and that's like in the 2000s, that's when like, you know, hip hop became the mainstream. Like before, it's so weird to think nowadays, like if you turn on the radio, chances are it's going to be a hip hop song.
Yeah.
It used to be like that with rock, like rock. Now,
I think
rock stars.
I think when it started to decline was when like what I call butt rock started coming, like Creed.
Yeah. And like, but the thing is, and then, you know, obviously in the 2000s, the Strokes, like they kind
more like indie rock kind of stuff.
But like, or Green Day, like had the resurgence with American Idiot. But for the most part, rock music was dying, and Weezer was coming up in the time that rock was dying. Yeah. So that's
a weird dynamic.
Yeah,
for sure.
And so that's another thing he's exploring here. But I'm sorry, this Diet Squirt is just so good. Tell us about Pink Triangle.
Pink Triangle. So Pink Triangle is hilarious. It's just a funny song. It's another, you know, it's a lot like, which one? It's not like Across the Sea, where it talks about like pining for a relationship with someone that you ultimately find out you can never have.
And also, much like the Japanese girl, he never spoke with her.
Yep.
There's a quote from Rivers about this song. I had a really intense crush on you, like my Rivers quote.
Yeah.
I had a really intense crush on a girl that I dreamed about her all the time through the fall semester. And then I found out she was a lesbian. It was something... Oh, wait, crap. I messed up the quote.
Just started from the top.
Started from the top. Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Yeah.
I had a really intense crush on a girl, and then I dreamed about her all through the fall semester. And then I found out she was a lesbian. It was someone I had never talked to. He never talked to her.
You said that in kind of an Aziz Ansari voice.
Oh, my name is Aziz. We can't.
Like when he reads that text, when he like talks about reading text.
This is good podcast material.
Yeah, it is.
And so anyway.
Wait, hold on. Let me try this one.
You're gonna roll with this Aziz thing?
Yeah.
You're gonna do this.
I had
again.
a really intense crush on a girl, and then I dreamed about her all through the fall semester. And then I found out she was a lesbian. It was someone I never even talked to.
So the name Pink Triangle is a reference to the pink triangle-shaped patches that the Nazis used to identify homosexual prison. What a weird sentence to be laughing during.
Alright.
Nazis, this is really messed up, but they would identify homosexual, or what they considered to be homosexual, whatever, I don't know, it's a broken world, with a pink triangle, and that's what the name of the song. But it's in a sense much like other cultural things that were used to degrade certain types of people. It has now been embraced as like a pride thing, so which is cool. In the sense of this song, though, one of my favorite Weezer lyrics ever, like of any Weezer album, because it's just so clever and good, is what was it?
It's my favorite.
It's the favorite lyric ever of all time.
The Jimmy World.
Everyone's a little queer. Why can't she be a little straight? Falling for You. It's like a grungy, hard, tasty song. That's the three words I wrote. Grungy, hard, and
like
tasty.
it's one of those like I'm falling for you. I do.
Like it's like he's mad about it. If this song, if you had the same lyrics and the same song structure and the same chords and everything, but just it was executed a little differently, it would be an entirely different song.
Oh yeah.
But the way that this song is executed shows
frustration.
It's frustration because this is where he's like gone through this whole album where he is, you know, he is dealing with all the stuff that we talked about, you know, feeling meaningless, longing for a meaningful relationship, dealing with his messed up freakness, dealing with his being shy, dealing with the freakness. And on this song, he's like, he meets this girl, he's like, I think I'm falling for you, and I have to give up my rockstar, and I just don't want to fall you. Like, that's the sense I get. It's like, I think I'm falling for you, instead of, I think I'm It's not like the Beach Boys. It could be like, wouldn't it be nice if we were older, then we wouldn't have, I think I'm falling for you, I hate you, you know?
The dog's scared.
It's okay. It's okay, Ellie.
He's like, what's going on?
It's a she. So anyway, But there's like this nasty guitar solo with all like it doesn't sound like, if you just heard it, like the quality of it would sound like I had done it in middle school, like in my computer, like recording it in MySpace or something. Did you see that MySpace just lost like
like tons of music, like
all of it
like,
pretty much.
They're just like, oops.
I read like the thing. It was like, we're sorry for any inconvenience this may cause.
Like,
that's why.
Are you kidding?
People put a lot of stock on like, I use Instagram as like, I just put stuff on there so that I can just have it as a memory.
Yeah.
Like,
Or with like Facebook, like people have photos and videos and stuff from like, when did it start? 2006, 7, even before that.
But it could go away.
They could go away like that. Or they could like even
MySpace. People are mad at MySpace, but they didn't.
Yeah, they should have known better to put.
They should have known better. Yeah, but like, it's not. MySpace was like, hey, we're gonna be here for the rest of all time. Like,
yeah.
Anyway,
listen.
But yeah, and then Falling for You, I think, is perfect because in some ways, Falling for You is an ending to the album because it's been this whole album exploring all this stuff, and then at the end, he's just frustrated. Like there isn't clarity. Like he is frustrated, and he has not landed on anything. He just he feels conflicted between a rock star lifestyle and wanting to settle down, and everything in between with all his weird sex and relationships and fantasies. And then at the end, he's like, I think I'm falling for this person, but I don't even know if I want that. And I think I've definitely been in situations where I am conflicted about relationships and whether or not I want it or whether or not it's good for me.
Yeah.
And that's another reason I think this is so relatable, is because people relate with that in the sense of most love songs are like nice and happy and I'm falling for you and I love you. With this one, the whole album is just like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
And that's just honest.
It's a big question mark.
I'm just being honest. And then Butterfly, I want you to take it. I've heard you describe Butterfly in the past in this really beautiful way, so I'm going to let you take this one away.
It's actually, like in the last podcast, I said it's a very long song, but it's actually under 3 minutes. So
you know what? I meant to say something in the last podcast about that.
Yeah,
because I didn't know. Because I remember thinking, I was like, is it
a long song?
I don't
it's
feel
not,
like it is.
Not at all. It's actually really like.
You said it so confidently though. I was like.
I was behind. You can do a lot.
I was like, maybe everything I've ever thought I've known is wrong. Maybe it's so good that I think it's short.
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes when something's really awesome, it seems short.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like when you wake up in the morning and you have 20 minutes left before your alarm goes off and it seems like 20 seconds, as opposed to if you're on the treadmill and you have 20 seconds left and it feels like 20 minutes.
Oh, man, that's squirt, man.
What just happened?
The bubbles.
You're like, come. So the final song on the album is called Butterfly.
Yep.
And I've always thought that this seems like, it's like Falling for You ends the story of the album, and then Butterfly is like an apology. It's beautiful. It's very different than kind of like how Only in Dreams was different than the rest of Blue. This is acoustic. It's one of the only acoustic Weezer songs on a Weezer album. And he's basically, it's like a metaphor for, you know, he sees this beautiful butterfly, which in my mind would be not only like all the girls he's talking about in this album, that I feel like he feels like he's harmed without meaning to. And in this song, he's exploring that he did and he's sorry. And it's kind of just beautiful and again, earnest. And it really just, it's like almost like an epilogue of the album.
Yeah, and it is influenced by the, so Pinkerton, the title, the cover, it's all influenced by a opera called Madama Butterfly by Giacomo Puccini, and basically the idea of like catching a butterfly only to have that butterfly wither away. And so it's kind of like that same thing, like he's trying to tie down a relationship, but in all these instances, the different things, they're either out of his grasp, they fly away, or that he pins them down and it's not what he wants it to be, or he's not what he expects it to be.
But when he says in this chorus, like, I'm sorry for what I did, I feel like he means it.
Yeah, he does mean it.
And
I just read that it's the only totally acoustic song that Weezer has ever commercially released. Which is interesting.
Everybody get dangerous, everybody get dangerous, ooh ah. Now it is time to explore the controversy, the fan reaction, the critic reaction, and how Revers
Kumo.
Let's tell us a bit about Pinkerton and how is it received.
Yeah. So,
Rob?
It is very iconic. The way you can't talk about.
I just want to acknowledge the fan noise right now.
Flipping flapjacks. Oh well. This is just the feedback of our podcast.
We're doing this on purpose.
Yeah, we're doing this on. When you talk about Pinkerton, there is always. It always goes hand in hand with the fan reaction and then the later fan
Reaction.
So whenever you talk about Pinkerton, you can't talk about it without talking about how the fans reacted initially and then how they kind of...
Fans and critics.
Fans, critics, even themselves. Like, they kind of realized, like, wow, this is quite an album.
Pinkerton debuted and peaked at number 19 on the U.S. Billboard charts, selling 47,000 copies in its first week, which was not as it didn't do as well as the Blue Album.
Nope.
Which was very successful.
Yeah.
Originally, so we mentioned earlier that it was supposed to be like a rock opera called Songs from the Black Hole.
Yep.
And Rivers said about this, I thought that my song, he was talking about in reference to the Blue Album.
Yeah.
He said, I thought my songs were really simplistic and silly, and I wanted to write complex, intense, beautiful music. And he was listening to a lot of Butterflies, Ada, Madama Butterfly, and the rock opera Jesus Christ Superstar, Les Miserables. And he wanted to make music like that. So it started off as this like science fiction rock opera, and there's all these characters, and it was like set in 2126, and there's this spaceship called Betsy too. Which was apparently named after their first like van. But anyway, they eventually decided to scrap it. They didn't feel like it was good.
Yeah.
And they did. And then Weezer was going to Harvard, and
they kind of all like went their separate ways for a second. They started, some of them were in other bands for a small amount of time, and Rivers kind of developed all these songs, and then he brought them back together.
And then we got Pinkerton.
Yeah, and the thing that differentiates this from a lot of their other albums is that it is self-produced. And that's why it's not as polished. That's why it's kind of more raw. And I actually was listening to some on their deluxe version on Spotify. You can listen to like the radio versions as opposed to like the album itself. And it's super weird because you can tell like they tried, when they put it out for radio, they tried to polish it up a little bit and make it less like feedback and less like noise and stuff. And it just sounds off. Like,
yeah, and I think that what the reason I want to talk about the black hole part in this section was that it was very clear that Rivers wanted to do something different than the Blue Album, but they ultimately decided to do Pinkerton, and then we talked about Pinkerton. But what's really interesting about Pinkerton, this is where I think this is when, as I was mentioning earlier, the supervillain, not that Rivers or Weezer is a supervillain, but what the Weezers we know them would never be the same after this album was released, and then fans, critics, and Rivers reacted to it. Because Rivers, for years, was embarrassed by its reception.
Refused to play it.
He didn't like the confessional nature. He said, and I quote, "This has been a tough year. It's not just the world has said Pinkerton isn't worth a shit, but it's that the Blue Album wasn't either. It was a fluke. It was a Buddy Holly video. I'm a shitty songwriter." In 2001, he said that it's a hideous record. It was such a hugely painful mistake that happened in front of hundreds of thousands of people and continues to happen on a grander and grander scale, and it just won't go away. He said it, as we referenced earlier, it's like getting really drunk at a party and spilling your guts in front of everyone and feeling incredibly great and cathartic about it, and then waking up the next morning to realize you made a complete fool of yourself. And so, like, it was and people did not like it, but as time went on, they went on a 5-year hiatus, and during that time, before the release of the Green Album in 2001, a ton of like popular bands cited that album as a huge influence. Jimmy Eat World, Saves the Day, Dashboard Confessional, Most City Soundtrack, and others. And Cuomo, he didn't even care. He told Rolling Stone in 2001, "The most painful thing in my life these days is the cult around Pinkerton. It's just a sick album. Sick in a diseased sort of way. It is a source of anxiety because all the fans we have right now stuck around because of that album. But honestly, I never..." Sorry. Excuse me. That's part of the quote. He says, "But honestly, I never want to play those songs again. I never want to hear them again." Oh my gosh!
Like that
he
is
hated
intense.
it. And listen, as we've discussed all the lyrics, this is brutally honest and showing his like dark weirdness.
Yeah.
Like I don't blame him at all. Like I wouldn't if I had written this album and people are like, "Oh wow, it's so honest," and you listen to it like, "Wow, this is messed up."
Yeah.
I would feel the same way. Like, and it's still fresh for him.
Oh yeah, and even like when he put out the album, or like before he initially put out the album, he like sent like an open letter to his fans. He was like, "This album's gonna be weird. I'm just letting you know before we put it out in the world."
And like,
don't
you know,
hold it against
it's
me.
gone on. Like it was voted the 16th best album of all time in 2002 by Rolling Stone survey. Similar praise from Pitchfork, Spin, and other music outlets.
Yeah.
And then as time goes on, and just like I think I can relate with this, you can relate with this.
Yeah.
In our lives, we often experience like something that was really horrible for us later makes us who we are, and we embrace it as a good thing. And I think he does that. In 2008, he said, "Pinkerton's great. It's super deep, brave, and authentic. Listening to it, I can tell that what I was really going for when I wrote it and recorded a lot of those songs." And then in 2010, he said, "Pinkerton has definitely taken on a life of its own, and it's become more accessible and accepted. As an artist, you just have to do what you believe at the time, whether it's accepted or not. You just have to keep going with it." And then I remember in 2008, they played these Blue Album Pinkerton shows, where one night they would play the Blue Album, the next night they would play Pinkerton. And he says about that, he says, "The experience of learning those songs again, singing them every night, working on them with the guys, and then being in a relatively small venue with 1,000 of the most hardcore Weezer fans and hearing them sing every syllable, seeing them air drum all the fills. It was an amazing experience and so different from what we'd been doing the years before that. So it was a great feeling of validation from the fans for this album that was so personal to me and has been such a source of pain for years." So I think after all this time, and that was 10 years ago that he said that, I think that he's just owned it and accepted, like, okay, this is what people love, this is why. But like I think that
it had to happen in stages.
It had to happen, but I think also the reason we've never got another album like Pinkerton is because, like, listen to him talk about it. It was horrible for him.
Oh yeah.
And like as a fan, it's like, "Oh, I'll do Pinkerton again." But for him, he was in that house with all the black walls in a severe state of depression, and then dealing with everyone knowing about it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do that either.
Oh yeah.
So he gets criticized later on for wanting to write the perfect pop song and not be as honest in his lyrics anymore.
And he is in like in his emotional. I think it's kind of like cruel for fans to be like,
Yeah.
"Why don't we write another Pinkerton song? Like, why don't you just go be depressed and write an album for us?"
It's like I remember when Ben Gibbard from Death got divorced. Everyone was all like, people expressed excitement because
they were like, "Oh,
the next Death Cab album is going to be like another Transatlantic." I'm like, that's pretty messed up.
Yeah,
So like I think Rivers, this album, just like it was almost like him hitting rock bottom.
Yeah.
And then everyone wanting him to stay there. Yeah. And he has not done that. And he has written, Weezer, and as we'll explore for the rest of this, bad songs, good songs, pop songs, rock songs. But now, I think that this caused him, he was like, "I'm never going to be that honest and earnest again. And I'm going to write pop songs that make people happy and are fun."
Or if he is going to be honest, he's going to disguise it. Kind of like the Blue Album.
Exactly.
Like he's going to
so
disguise
he's like,
it.
"I can do this." Like I think Black Album is a perfect example
of
that. But he's not on the Black Album. He's not like going into detail about this weird relationship with the fans. He's like doing it with tongue in cheek. Yeah. And so I think that, and also, I don't think once he finally got over Pinkerton, I don't think they've ever taken themselves that seriously ever since then. And so now we don't really know what Rivers is like. Like he is a character. Like, and we see Rivers Cuomo. He doesn't, like, look at his Twitter, look at his Instagram, look at his songs.
Yeah, he's embraced the meme.
He's embraced the meme, and he's also embraced, like, I'm not going to take myself seriously, and my fans aren't going to take me seriously, and critics aren't going to take me seriously, and that's okay, and that's exactly what I want, because his experience with fans and critics and himself taking himself seriously was terrible.
And in a way, it's very punk rock.
Oh, very much so.
Like,
I think if you can get to a place where you don't really care what people think, and I'm sure he does, I mean, everyone does, but like, the way he comes across is, you know what? I did this thing, and now I'm going to do something else. And if people don't like it or don't want it or want that, then they can just listen to Pinkerton.
Yeah.
That was 20 years ago, or
how long ago?
It's over 20.
Yeah, over 20. Damn.
23 years ago.
That's crazy.
I was 5.
Yeah, 4 or 5.
But anyway, that's Pinkerton. This episode went a little long.
Yeah.
But that's okay though. It's
great.
Pinkerton. It had to.
Yeah,
like there's a lot of ground to cover.
A lot of what have yous. A lot of.
So anyway, there was a 5-year hiatus between Pinkerton and Green, which means there's going to be a 5-year hiatus. We're going to take a 5-year break before we do
see you guys in a while.
the Green album. Just kidding. I mean, chances are no one will ever hear this anyway because we're having all these issues with getting this released. But it will be released.
Yeah, we will get it out there at some point.
But anyway, this episode was not brought to you by Diet Squirt, but hopefully the next one will be.
We never know.
You never know. Not just Squirt, though. Diet Squirt.
So overall, we didn't do favorites.
We don't need to, man.
Let's just do
it. Just real quick. All right. What's your favorite song?
All right. So for me...
and again, the same thing about Blue Album. I love every song on this album. So picking a least favorite is, I still love the song.
Okay, my favorite is The Good Life. Just because it has that...
You got that history with it.
I got that history, man. I thought it was saying nomad, and I felt that so much because I had been away from home for so long and living in a place where I didn't quite fit in. And I was like, man, I just don't want to be a nomad anymore.
Mine is Pink Triangle.
What's your favorite?
Pink Triangle. That's like not... El Scorcho's up there. I mean, like I could honestly make an argument for any one of these songs being my favorite, but Pink Triangle, I just think it's fun. I relate to it. It's like not... It isn't taking itself too seriously, but it's also like... I've had a crush on girls that I've never even talked to or like fantasize or whatever, and it's just so clever, and it's got that line, everyone's a little queer, can't she be a little straight? Like it's just like knowing like I want this thing that I cannot have.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I just really like that song. And my least favorite, if I had to pick, would be "Falling for You." Which is interesting because even talking about it in this podcast has made me realize how clever that song is.
Oh, yeah.
Just in the production alone is so impressive how it just shows how you can change the context and meaning of a song by just changing the production and the feel of it. But if I'm just going to throw on a song from Pinkerton or like show someone a song from Pinkerton, it's not going to be this one.
Yeah.
It'll probably be another one. So.
For me, I think my least favorite for the longest time was Tired of Sex.
Yeah.
I think I skipped that a lot. Just because I was like, I feel
weird
listening to this song.
The weirder song is Across the Sea.
Yeah, Across the Sea. Well, they're all.
But seriously, like we could re-edit this podcast, and I could tell you why each and every song on this album is my favorite song off of the album. So least favorites are kind of irrelevant, but I had to pick one, so I picked that one.
There we go.
Anyway,
thanks for joining us. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.
Also, make sure you watch. We have another YouTube series called Podcasters in the Kitchen
Making Coffee. Yeah, search it. It's on my channel, Adam Robb. Just search Adam Robb.
Really good.
Pop up.
You can maybe prepare yourself a cup of coffee and then listen to some Weezer and listen to this podcast.
Just come on this journey with us. Thanks for listening to the podcast.
I'm just gonna. I keep looking at Adam and waiting because he thinks I'm gonna turn it off and I don't. So then he just says something else because he feels like he has to.
Thanks for